yeah, that's.
Well, I mean, we wanted to talk today a little bit about what's been going on with the coronavirus and how it's been impacting the criminal justice system in New Jersey specifically. And, you and I were talking the other day, and I can look at it from the standpoint of a former prosecutor. I was a prosecutor for 18 years, 15 in New Jersey. And now for the last almost 2.5 years, I've been working as a defense attorney. So I've got that perspective. And I've just never seen anything like this at all. The courts are essentially shut down. It's amazing from my perspective to think about how much has happened in such a short period of time. Significant, obviously, but jails and prisons, they're essentially petri dishes for this virus because of the high rate of transmission and, no immunity whatsoever. So, the question becomes when you're looking at these different types of facilities, how to keep the virus out, and if it gets in, how to contain and limit the spread. When you're dealing with jails and prisons specifically, you've got the issues of, the Constitution, 5th and 14th Amendment due process considerations, right to a speedy trial, prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment. The thing that makes jails and prisons so much different from schools, nursing homes is, you can't socially distance in jail. You've got, tons of hygiene issues, ventilation issues, most significantly security issues. So when you add all this up, it's a real mess.
And what channels are being used? Like, you're a criminal defense attorney. Are you in a position where you have to jump on Google to know what's going on? What's the channel of information, and who's keeping you up to date and to what effect?
Yeah, well, in New Jersey, we've got a website. It's and it's accessible to the public. It's njcourts.gov, and it's updated daily. I mean, in the last couple weeks, it's been updated multiple times a day. We've got flurries of notices and court orders coming out. You almost can't even keep up with them. 20 notices and court orders telling us different things that are happening and how the courts in New Jersey are, addressing the issue. I think one thing that people don't realize, and when folks are talking about jails versus prisons, it's important, I think, just to take a minute to distinguish the two. Jails essentially are inmates who are serving a jail sentence of less than a year. And they're also inmates who are awaiting trial on more serious cases. Those individuals are routinely transported back and forth from the jail to the courthouses. Prisons, on the other hand, house individuals who are serving sentences, greater than 1 year. So each of these facilities, jails and prisons, have their own unique issues that they have to deal with. But probably when it comes to the coronavirus, jails more significantly, just because of the fact that they are routinely transported in and out, sometimes on a daily basis.
What's the hit list on the criminal side? So then you're thinking, okay, you've got a segment of the population who's in these petri dishes, but then you've got a segment of the population who just found out they might be headed for a petri dish. What's the hit list in terms of information you have that can be valuable to somebody who's already worried about, incarceration or some sort of criminal, issue that they have in the New Jersey courts, but now it's, am I going to do this? Are they going to have my trial? Are they going to have my trial by phone? And is that even fair? And then if they have my trial by phone and find me guilty, are they going to send me to a petri dish for coronavirus? What material information do you have that's your 1, 2, 3 bullet points for somebody who's in one of those two situations, either in, or maybe a family member who's got somebody in, somebody who's worried about heading it?
That's a good question. I mean, there's a ton of uncertainty right now, and that's part of the problem. First of all, courts and jails and prisons all over the country have been responding in the last few weeks, and a lot of news stories have been put out about how jails and prisons are releasing individuals in response to the coronavirus. So, a lot of people that are in jail are calling saying, when am I getting out? And that's just not necessarily the case. What has happened specifically in New Jersey is that, the courts have put in some different measures over the last few weeks with regard to how they're going to address it. And it's a little bit confusing because, essentially they've decided, and this began about 2 weeks ago, that they were going to stop having jury trials. They were not going to impanel any more petit juries in the state of New Jersey. They also indicated that they weren't going to have any more grand juries in the state of New Jersey for right now. And that was the first response. Then there was an order that came out saying, hey, we're not going to have municipal court proceedings. We're going to suspend all municipal court proceedings. Then there was a notice saying, hey, we're going to suspend all in-person court proceedings. The courts indicated they were going to encourage video proceedings if possible, but essentially everything was just getting postponed. And remember, video proceedings like virtual courtrooms, Zoom calls, they're helpful to some extent. If there's an uncontested hearing, that's great. You can do it via Zoom. But for a contested hearing or a trial, Zoom or virtual courtrooms are just really not workable. People have a right to confront witnesses against them, and you really can't do that via Zoom. It's great to the extent that you can use it, but it's not always practical. So, last night we got another major notice that came out, and it said basically, look, all in-court proceedings are going to be postponed through April 26th. Now, that's significant. And the reason it's significant, particularly in New Jersey, is because of a change that occurred in New Jersey to the criminal justice system and specifically the bail system.
Ooh. Is this the rule they changed a couple years ago that says the kind of if you they're not whacking everybody with bail necessarily, but they will hold you overnight?
Right. So essentially, what happened a couple years ago, there was the cash bail system in New Jersey. So you get arrested, you get put on a warrant, the judge would set a bail. Cash bail could be bonded. The problem was that there were too many individuals sitting in jail on bails that they couldn't make. It was really deemed to be discriminatory to low-income people. So January of 2017, criminal justice reform hit New Jersey. And that essentially eliminated a cash bail system. So, you get arrested, you get put on a warrant, you're gonna, have your fingerprints taken, and they're gonna determine what type of a risk you are, whether or not you're a risk in terms of being a danger to the community, whether you're a flight risk, and thirdly, whether or not you are at risk to obstruct the criminal justice process. Most of the people that are arrested do get released on some sort of pretrial condition. But the individuals that are deemed either to be a danger to the community or a flight risk or might obstruct the criminal justice process, courts now have the authority to hold those people without bail, basically detain them without any bail at all. Now, there's certain speedy trial rights that person's going to have as a result of being detained without bail. The first is prosecutors have to get that case indicted if they're going to proceed on it within 90 days. And then secondly, once that case gets indicted or that person gets indicted, the prosecutors have 180 days to bring the case to trial, or else the defendant has to be released. The tricky part about that is that time, that 180 days, can be extended up to a maximum of 2 years. The way it gets extended is, let's say, Tom, you get arrested, you get detained without bail, I'm your attorney, you and I talk about the case and we decide, hey, you were interviewed by the police. They took a statement from you, but maybe when we look at it, we think, hey, your rights were violated, and we're going to file a motion to have whatever statement you gave suppressed. So, if I'm your attorney, I file a motion to suppress your statement. That time that is, it takes to file a motion, both sides file, briefs, we go to court, we argue it, maybe there's testimony, all that time gets excluded. Basically, it doesn't count against the state. It extends that 180 days because it's a request that you made to litigate a particular issue. So that excludable time gets kind of added on to the 180 days that the prosecutor has to bring your case to trial. The reason that this becomes important now is that, the courts in New Jersey in the last couple of weeks have indicated that there's not going to be any more in-court proceedings. To the extent that we can have, video court, that's great, but, the time for those individuals that are detained right now without bail, this time is excluded. So as of right now, there were a couple orders that were issued. One on March 19th that excluded the time between March 12th and March 29th. And then this order that came out on Friday that got posted that said, hey, now the time between March 29th and April 26th is now excludable. So that's basically a total of 45 days that's being counted, against a defendant who's being detained as a result of this virus. So they're getting credit for the time that they're in. It's not that they're not getting credit for that time that they're serving, but it's essentially dead time for them in terms of, that time is essentially giving the state extra time to get their case to trial. And so, individuals that are being detained right now in New Jersey, this is significant. The coronavirus obviously is not their fault. They shouldn't be essentially warehoused while the courts figure out what they're going to do about about their cases. The other thing is that the order that came out from the courts over the weekend, basically refers to this April 26th date as kind of an end date, right? But I think that all of us would agree that, hey, it's very likely that come April 26th, we're not going to be able to get back into court. The significance of what's going on, we haven't even reached the peak of cases that we're going to see in this country. So to say that the April 26th date is an end date is probably overly optimistic, in my opinion. So
I'd be shocked if
consider.
I'd be shocked from an administrative point of view if they weren't simply using it as an opportunity to figure out what the plan is and what infrastructure adjustments they'll need going forward to handle anything. Because
oh yeah, I don't envy.
It's going to be worse on that day. Things will be
worse.
like, you've seen what the death numbers of are, we're starting to see the results of people having St. Patrick's Day parties.
Right. And I don't envy the courts to have to make these decisions, but it is absolutely something that we need to think about now. And I question whether or not, criminal justice reform in New Jersey is workable right now, given this particular situation.
You mean, and you're, to put it in simple black and white terms, that they should go back to the bail system?
Well, I mean, you've got issues.
That's the example. That's the only thing we've got so far in terms of what we've talked about in criminal justice reform that's material to being held or anything like that. So is that the only component that you think wholesale?
Well, there could be certain bail components added back in. You've got the option for maybe bracelet, house arrest. You've got, now you do, defense attorneys do have the ability to file motions on behalf of their clients to ask the courts to reconsider the detention order in light of this particular situation. If especially if there is a client who is being detained that would be at high risk should the virus get into the jail. They're older, they have a health issue, that would make them more susceptible to becoming sick should the virus get in the jail. And it's going to get in the jail. I mean, it has already gotten into jail. So we see this all across the country. New York City, Louisiana. There was I think over the weekend, there was a federal prisoner being held in a low security facility down in Louisiana that died. So it's going to happen. It's going to get it. It has. And so I think that these are things that, the courts have to consider, and the AG's office needs to consider, the public defender's office needs to consider, the prosecutor's offices need to consider. Now, some inmates in New Jersey were ordered released. And I want to be clear, because this is actually creating some confusion. The inmates that were released were inmates that were that had already been sentenced, that were essentially serving county jail sentences, whether it was as a result of municipal court conviction, whether it was as a result of, fourth degree, lower level conviction, or whether or not they were serving county jail sentences as a condition of probation or as a sentence on a violation of probation. There was an order that came out last week releasing those individuals, but they were individuals that had already been sentenced. They were not individuals that were pending sentencing. And the idea was that, hey, this doesn't make sense to hold these individuals. They're low level, low risk individuals. They could potentially be paroled anyway very soon on their county jail sentence. And so they were released. Now,
Can I jump in?
And I should say that the prosecutor's office had the ability to object on specific individuals. It wasn't that the prosecutor's offices didn't have the ability to object to their release. But you saw some backlash from that. I was actually surprised to see that in my home county of Cumberland County, the freeholders issued a statement expressing their collective outrage over the release of county jail inmates, on this particular order, and suggested their release could cause, community spread because they hadn't tested negative. Of course, my response was, well, these individuals haven't tested positive either. In fact, if the freeholders had actually read the entire order, they would have seen that the order specifically said if an individual had tested positive, they couldn't be released, pursuant to that particular order. And from my perspective, I would think that the counties and the individuals and the politicians would be concerned about a civil rights lawsuit for keeping individuals in jail who could potentially, get sick and die. So that order that came out a week ago, releasing inmates serving county jail sentences, was a smart move, in my opinion.
Well, here's the
fact,
thing
the individuals who are still in there, who are actually, innocent until proven guilty. The individuals that are detained, even though they're serious cases, they are not guilty. They haven't been proven guilty. They're awaiting trial. They're only being detained because, again, the criminal justice reform has said that serious offenses, maybe a flight risk, maybe obstruct process, those individuals can be detained.
Argument either way. The one's presumed innocent, but the other one, you have a lot of accountability. They're on the books. Somebody's got an eye on them, so to speak, because they got convicted for something. Whether it was.
And remember, here's the other thing: the order releasing these particular inmates, it suspended their sentence. It didn't. It was a little bit unclear as to whether or not, when this is all over, they might have to go back and complete their sentence. Another thing to consider is that a lot of these individuals serving a county jail sentence as a condition of probation. They're being released, but they're still being supervised on probation. And so I agree, if you're trying to thin out the ranks in the county jails, which are already crowded, which are already, a breeding ground should somebody get the virus in the jail, these are the perfect individuals to release in order to alleviate that pressure on the jail system. On the premise that individuals who are arrested are innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. So, the question then, it really begs the question as to, what about, it brings me back, what do we do about these individuals that are being detained without bail? Look, street cases, they're getting new dates. I mean, they're just pushing those street cases out. I spent a majority of the last 2 weeks erasing things in my calendar and moving them out a couple weeks, and now we're going to be doing it all over again, erasing things in my calendar and moving it out a couple weeks. So the street cases are one thing. Now, I've got a lot of clients who aren't happy with the delay, and they're on the street. And look, I'm telling them nothing really you can do. They don't want a lot of people coming into the courthouse right now, and we can all appreciate that. There is a question in the back of my mind as to how long we're going to be able to push those cases out. There's going to be a backlog at some point, but the immediate concern from my perspective really are my clients that are detained and are detained without bail. The time is being considered excludable time, like I just explained a couple minutes ago. That's a major concern right now. I don't know necessarily what the answer is, but again, you talked about it a couple minutes ago. Is criminal justice reform workable right now in New Jersey? I think it's something we need, that needs to be talked about sooner rather than later, because I don't see how come April 26th, much is going to change.